Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Casual Columnist. As always, I'm your host. Welcome back. One of my writers today, Matt, thank you, has written all about Mark Kilroy, the Devil of Mexico, and the Los Narco-Satanicos. The format of the show, if you're new here, I've never read this before. You, me, we're going to explore Matt's script together. So let's just jump in, shall we? Most of you might be familiar with a little American institution called Spring Break. I'm not even American, and I've watched enough American teen movies. Like, I grew up in the era of American Pie. I know what Spring Break is. Spring Break! I never went on Spring Break because we don't have Spring Break. We just have spring. I think we call them Easter holidays. I can't be the only one who sometimes felt that school simply was that long, boring slog, just getting from one vacation to the other, right? Returning after winter break was always the worst, especially when I had to get up early on those freezing cold mornings. Yeah, you used to have to walk to like the bus stop to go to school, and it's like 10 minutes, and in the winter it's so cold, and you're like, oh, it's just miserable. It's just raining. UK grey rain never ends. That's why spring break was always a treat back in the day. The weather was turning around, getting warmer by the day, which led to plans being made and fun being had. Swimming in the pool, trips down to the beach, barbecues with friends and family on those warm spring afternoons. It really was the life. It does sound fairly idyllic, and look, I'm recording this in mid-December. Mid-December. It's cold and grey outside. I'm like, spring sounds nice, and winter hasn't even probably started yet. Or you might be one of those people who are living the high life, those more well-to-do than most. You might go traveling during spring break. Wait, I thought that's what everyone did. In every movie, they always go to like Mexico on spring break or to Florida or something, no? You might take trips to places like England, Ireland, Scotland, Italy, Japan, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Australia, Thailand, etc. Holy sh! I mean, yeah, I just thought people just went down to Mexico from the United States. It's like right next door. But like going to Australia or Thailand for spring break? All right. Yeah. Guess that's that money. Or of course you might take a trip to see America, stopping off in places like New York, Florida, California, or Hawaii. I personally have never been out of the country myself. Ooh, but my sisters have on occasion. Interesting that. I always used to think, it's kind of weird that Americans don't travel. Like the statistics around like American passport ownership and travel I was always quite surprised by. Because in Europe we travel a lot. But then I was like, yeah, but plenty of people in Europe would be like, oh yeah, Americans don't travel. It's like, but have you ever left Europe? And they're like, oh no, but I've been to like lots of European countries. And it's like, yeah, but just imagine Europe is kind of like, European Union, United States. Just imagine them kind of similar. And there's lots of cultural differences. And the same thing is in America. Like the cultural differences between like, I don't know, the South and the Northwest, or the place in the, does the Northeast have a name like the New England? Is that what it's called? Like, it's all going to be really different. And so I kind of was like, oh yeah, if you never left England, you'd be like, well, it's really small. So it'd be a bit weird.
Just before we continue, we have partnered with Geology, the 36-time award-winning skincare company, to bring you this video. Look, if you've struggled with acne, oily skin, or signs of aging, what are you talking about? Why would I struggle with signs of aging as a man rapidly approaching middle age? What are you talking about? It never happened. But the good news is, Geology absolutely has you covered. Geology creates simple, personalized routines tailored to your unique skin goals. After a quick 60-second quiz, their team of dermatologists designs a regimen specifically for you. From their award-winning salicylic acid face wash to their hydrating SPF face cream and their retinol night cream, each product is powered by proven ingredients that have been trusted for decades. Plus, it's delivered right to your door. Actually, just got this yesterday. There's no hassle, there's no guesswork, they make it easy. With over 10,000 5-star reviews, people swear by how Geology has transformed their skin. And now you can see the results for yourself with an exclusive 70% off your personalized trial set. So go to geolog.ie/casual70 or scan the QR code on the screen now and use the code casual70. That's over $49 worth of skincare for just $15. So, take the first step towards your best skin yet with Geology today. And now back to today's episode.
One of the most popular places for mostly high school and college kids to head to is Mexico. Our southern neighbor offers his guests wonderful food, beautiful sights, fascinating culture and history, and of course, the bustling nightlife of Mexico City. It is a shining beacon for vacations every year during the spring and summer. Hell, one of my best friends has gone down to Cancun with his family on more than one occasion for week-long vacations. I mean, yeah, I don't think that's Super uncommon, right? He doesn't remember past his vacation due to copious amounts of alcohol, thanks to Mexico's lax drinking laws, but that's a story for another time. Wait, is it lax or is it just like you could be 18 like a normal country? That is exactly what one 21-year-old Mark Kilroy had planned to do. It was spring break, and he and his buddies had discussed their trip for months and then drove down to South Texas and headed across the border into Mexico. They planned to take advantage of the previously mentioned lax drinking laws to party it up, meet gorgeous girls, and have a spring break they would never forget. But he's 21, he doesn't need to go down to Mexico to drink, does he? It's like lax drinking laws. 21 in Texas, you can still drink. I remember as an adult, I went to America just when I turned 21 because me and my mate were like, yeah, we'd like to go travel around America. But we've been used to like drinking for years. And then to not be able to go to a bar and have a beer would be so weird. So we waited till we were 21 and then we went to America. Unfortunately, that's exactly what they got, just not in the way they could have possibly anticipated. Because you see, on the night of March 13th, 1989, Mark Kilroy would vanish, never to be seen again. Alive, anyway. So as the darkness engulfs us, let me guide you, Simon and dear listeners, as we travel across the border to the land of tequila, tacos, and marachis to speak on the disappearance and death of a bright and kind young man. His end is a sad one, and one that helped uncover a plot so deranged and evil that those in the know still shudder at the mention of it. A group of people so dark and depraved, I know there's a chance Simon might not have the stomach for it, and the entire tragedy was orchestrated by a man so selfish, vile, and insane that while he might have been known as the Godfather, he might as well have been called the Devil. This is the sad story of the murder of Mark Kilroy and the evil deeds of Los Narco-Satanicos, the Narco-Satanists. Wait, I mean, I get that, the drug gangs are like super violent and stuff, but what's this random American tourists got to do with you? I feel like if you're a random tourist, maybe they'll kidnap you, but they're not into kidnapping, are they? They're into drugs. That's where they make all the money. What's this guy got to do with you? I feel like you're going to bring more heat on yourselves than you need to by just murdering a random American tourist rather than like another drug dealer or baron or whatever. Anyway, I guess we're going to find out, aren't we? And it sounds like a miserable episode, so bracing myself for that. Spring breaking down south. Let's take things slow and get to know the man at the center of this story. Mark James Kilroy was born on March the 5th, 1968 in Chicago, Illinois. Oh, this was happening a while ago, in the 80s. To parents James William Jim Kilroy and Helen Josephine Kilroy, a chemical engineer and volunteer paramedic respectively. Raised in Santa Fe, Texas, along with brother Keith, Mark was brought up as a Catholic and attended Mass at Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church in the town of Hitchcock, Texas with his family. To call Mark a success story and an all-American boy is an understatement. He was a member of the Boy Scouts, he played baseball, basketball, and golf. He was both a student council member and an honor student at Santa Fe High School. There's a picture of this dude that I'm looking at in my script in black and white, and I'm like, this guy just looks like an all-American dude. He's got that 80s mullet going on as well. Looks like a nice guy. Oh god, oh god, I don't like this. He's gonna get killed. He was a popular kid and made many friends, including his lifelong buddies, Bill Huddleston, Bradley Moore, and Brent Martin. Bill, Bradley, and Brent. These are the most American dude-sounding names ever. Going down south with the 3 Bs. Bill, Bradley, and Brent. Mark's success in life continued after he graduated from high school in 1986. At first, he attended Southwest Texas State University and then transferred to Tarleton State University on a basketball scholarship and even made it into a fraternity. He does look like he would belong in a fraternity. However, this man had goals for his life and he knew exactly what he needed to do. He wanted to get into medicine, so he gave up his athletic pursuits and transferred to the University of Texas at Austin, becoming a pre-med student and beginning to prepare for his MCAT or medical college admission test. Mark was on track to do big things, good things, and he probably thought that his spring break would be just like all the rest, until it wasn't. For months, Mark, Bill, Bradley, and Brent were excited about this trip. Every time they got together to hang out, every time they spoke, the trip was always brought up, and it put a smile on all of their faces. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like I was in this young dude's position where you're like, yeah, the future is going to be great. Life is great. Doing some trips with my friends. You got no worries. Yeah, no, I remember this. Oh God, I'm relating too hard to make this episode tolerable. And so on March the 10th, 1989, with their exams and assignments done and their classes over, the festivities proceeded in full. Bradley had finished his exams early, so he jumped into his car, headed down to Austin, and grabbed Mark. Undoubtedly, there were a ton of smiles, whooping, and bro hugs. Shotgun! And before the two of them headed to Santa Fe to grab Bill and Brent, starting the whole male friend ritual all over again when they got together. Nice. It's the bros broing it up. The trip took them 9 hours due to some heavy fog they encountered along the way, but soon enough, the foursome arrived at South Padre Island, a resort town in Cameron County, Texas. They arrived just before the stroke of midnight, checked in at the Sheraton hotels and resorts, and then after unpacking, the four friends made their way to the beach. Spring break was in full swing, and even though they had 5 weeks of fun ahead of them, they weren't going to waste a single second of it. The beach was pretty bare, and they basically had it to themselves, enabling them to just sit back and relax on that first night. After that, though, well, that is when the party got started. Vacationers and tourists alike flooded the hotels and beaches on South Padre Island. Drinking, partying, and having fun was the name of the game, and the boys were all having a good time. There was no shortage of free and viable entertainment for all on the island, including free movies, free concerts, calls home, surf simulator activities, that sounds awesome, and opportunities to appear on TV commercials, okay, all provided by the big beer sponsorships in the area. This place sounds awesome. I mean, as an adult, middle-aged man, now I'm like, not for me. I'd be like, I don't want to go there. But if I was this dude, if I was this age, I'd be like, hell yeah, dude, this seems great. For Mark and his friends, this was paradise, exactly what they had dreamed about. Tons of beer to go around, a lovely beach to relax on and play in the ocean, and they could all do it together, just as they'd planned. And of course, all the girls they could possibly flirt and or hook up with. According to his friends, Mark and the gang spent time with different ladies each night, namely girls from Purdue University and the University of Kansas, and they all partied together until the wee hours of the morning. They were loving life. They didn't have a care in the world, and even managed to catch a Miss Tan Line competition. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like, and I think we can all imagine the hordes of horny teenagers and college boys having a wonderful time ogling lovely ladies and their tan lines. And that's even all before they hoofed it down to Mexico. These guys are having a good-ass time. In the intro, I mentioned that Mexico has pretty lax drinking laws compared to the United States, and I don't think I need to explain why that would be mighty attractive to a bunch of rowdy college kids looking for a good time at a party that never ends. Wait, I feel like I do need extra explanation, because they're 21, they can drink in America. Why do they need to go south of the border to grab a beer? Is it like, would you get cut off in America if you get a bit too rowdy? I don't know, it's interesting. I've never been cut off. It's also because I'm not particularly rowdy. At least I've never been cut off that I can remember. Fair point. Put that disclaimer in there. And so after parking their cars in a safe place in Brownsville late at night, Mark, his boys, and the girls they'd made friends with would simply walk across the Gateway International Bridge and head down to Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico to continue the party. It wasn't until the next morning that Mark and his friends would stumble back across the bridge to sleep off their hangovers and get ready to start the party anew the very next night. Oh wait, hang on. Parking their cars. Oh, I see. So they're actually staying in America and they're just crossing this bridge. I just assumed that they went, just drove down into Mexico and stayed at a resort there for a week or whatever. But it seems like they're staying in America, then crossing this bridge. If I was like an 18-year-old in America, I'd be like, oh man, I wish I lived down south, right next to the border with that international bridge where it's like you just cross and they're like, well, you're an adult in Mexico. Welcome, welcome. You must cross that bridge, right? And there's just bars, right? And probably pharmacies. I went to Tijuana once. I was in San Diego and I crossed the border into Tijuana for the day. And I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of bars and a lot of pharmacies. If only they'd known that heading back across the border that very next night would change their lives forever. From fun to misery. On the third day in paradise, everything went to hell. On the 13th of March 1989, Mark, Bill, Bradley, and Brent all woke up, nursed their hangovers, hung out for most of the day, and started a party all over again once the sun started going down. They attended another tan line contest, as well as a condo party with a former frat brother of Mark's. At around 10:30 that night, they all got in their cars, drove back to the bridge, and hopped across the border to Matamoros to keep the drunken festivities going. Wait, is this like just the 80s how it was? You drive to that bridge, you cross the bridge, you party it up, and then you cross the bridge and just get in your car and drive home. Just like super drunk. That night, Matamoros was the very definition of a party city. The streets, sidewalks, and nightclubs were jam-packed with over 15,000 foreign tourists all looking to have the time of their lives while on spring vacation. All of them were drunk, All of them were loud and rowdy, and the air was filled with the sounds of loud laughter and even louder music. It was just kind of the place for teens and college kids to throw off their worries and have a blast, as well as the kind of place for a certain kind of predator to hunt to their heart's content. Oh that sentence turned dark really quickly. I feel like I should reread that with the appropriate intonation. Let me try again. It was just the kind of place for teens and college kids to throw off their worries and have a blast, as well as the kind of place for a certain kind of predator to hunt to their heart's content. That's better. That's dark. That night, Mark and company first went to a bar known as Los Sombreros, which not only had the shortest line, but was known for its jamming rock music and its bright neon lights. They didn't stay long and eventually ended up at the Hard Rock Cafe. It was much louder, rowdier, and crowded bar, the kind of place where you'd have to scream in order to get a word in with someone standing right beside you, which I find to be extremely frustrating. Does anyone like this? I don't know. I haven't been to a nightclub in 20 years or whatever. But it's you go in, it's so loud. Why are we... you can barely hear someone standing next to you and you're shouting in their ear. I don't know. I guess I'm just an old ass man, because I guess I never used to mind it. But now I'm that sounds horrible. Mark and his buddies spent quite some time there enjoying their drinks as they made small talk with the ladies at the bar. It was around 2 a.m, and Bill said that they should start heading back to South Padre Islands, to which they all agreed. Mark had stepped away to talk to a few lovely ladies, and when the rest of the group exited the bar, they saw him chatting up one of the beautiful contestants from the Miss Tan Line competition that they'd attended earlier in the day. All 4 of them started walking in the direction of the bridge. Oh, okay, so they managed to peel him away. Come on. Dude, not right now. The city's main tourist street, Alvaro Obregon, was still a madhouse of foot traffic, and it was hard for the group to stick together. Just a little further, and they would be home free, but Mark wanted to say a thorough goodbye to Miss Tadline. I know he did he? And she lived close by. So while Brent and Bradley went ahead to wait at a nearby restaurant, Mark walked her home, with Bill sticking close by to keep an eye on him. They'll be like, yeah, are we waiting for him? It's let's not wait for him. He's not coming. After dropping her off, a visibly Mark drunk was making his way back towards Bill. Oh, okay, there we go. A gentleman there. Bill, who was also utterly smashed, heard the call of nature and told Mark to wait a moment while he ducked into a nearby alley to relieve himself. As he did so, he took notice of a Mexican man approaching Mark. I heard him say something like, "Didn't I just see you somewhere?" or "Where did I last see you?" Now, Bill didn't think anything of it and simply walked into the privacy of the alley to take a whiz, and when he came back out, Mark was gone. Yeah, I'd do exactly the same thing. I'd be like, I don't know what he wants. I'm going to go have a slash, and then I'll be back. Even in his drunken state, Bill knew that something was not right. Mark was not the type of person to just up and disappear like that, especially somewhere that they only had a passing knowledge of. In the words of Ryan Fenley, another friend of Mark's, quote, "Mark wasn't that type of guy. He acted very well academically, athletically, and was just a good, very well obedient guy. He was faithful and loyal. Mark sounds like a good dude. I feel like I'd be friends with Mark." Me and Mark would bro it up together. And so Bill began to panic. This obviously was the age before cell phones, so there was no way to get in contact with Mark wherever he was. Bill went to get Brent and Bradley to help him look for Mark, and the trio of friends searched up and down Alvaro Obregon and the surrounding area for hours, even after businesses had long closed and the streets were bare. That's friendship right there. Yeah, these dudes seem like good dudes. This seems like a good group of dudes. Duding it up. Speaking from experience, I know I would never give up looking for my best friends, and that they'd do the same for me. Anyone would be lucky to have friends like Bill, Bradley, and Brent that night. Yeah, I'd like to think that if this situation was reversed, people would be like, we should probably find Simon. He's not the sort of guy to just wander off in a random country. Let's go find him. Soon enough, the clock struck 4:30 in the morning, and after coming up empty-handed over and over, the trio thought that maybe somehow Mark had simply slipped past them and was waiting for them by their cars. Maybe they'd even find him snoozing behind the wheel. So, making their way across the bridge to Brownsville, they went to their cars. Oh, right, there's no phones. Because in the past, you'd just be like, oh, well, Brent, go look at the car and tell us if he's there. And then you're just cool, right? But it's more complicated because it's the past. But they didn't find him there. Then they thought maybe Mark had caught a ride home with someone else and had made his way back to South Padre without them. He was probably passed out in bed, dreaming about Miss Tanline. They made their way back to the hotel, but sadly, upon opening the door and rushing in, hoping to see their friend in a drunken stupor, they were met with an empty room. In a final act of hopeful desperation, praying that their friend was actually okay, they foolishly thought Perhaps he had hooked up with some girl and had shacked up with her for the night. And so, their hearts and minds still swirling with worry and hope, the three boys went to bed. Yeah, I'd be worried, but I mean, you've done a lot. And then you'd be like, well, maybe that girl came back and was like, hey, Mark! Later that day, Mark was still nowhere to be found, so the boys called the police to report their best friend as missing. The investigation didn't start off on the right foot, let me tell you. First of all, Mexican police took a very lackadaisical approach in the first few days, which are undoubtedly the most important during a missing persons case if the goal is to actually find the person they're searching for alive and in one piece. I also have to say, I'm not going to say the police are being lazy yet, because it's spring break. There's 15,000 foreign tourists who are coming to their town to drink and hopefully get lucky with some ladies. And the idea that he could just be hungover in someone else's bed right now is entirely reasonable, and probably the assumption that a reasonable person would make. But the Mexican police had theorized that Mark was just another hammered college tourist kid, and he'd probably come back soon enough, having gotten lost in his drunken state with no memory of what had happened. Hell, in the first 3 months of 1989 alone, about 60 tourists had gone missing, including Mark, and most had been found in similar predicaments as the one I'd described. Yes, statistically, that's probably what would, you've got to, you'd assume that. You can't assume that everyone who goes missing in a college drunken spring break town is, being kidnapped by devil drug people. But then the US got involved, and that's when things started to be taken more seriously, with the police task force being set up in Brownsville to try and locate Mark. And what did the police in Matamoros do? Well, they claimed that the clearly irresponsible and rowdy college student had vanished in Brownsville. Not in good old Matamoros, heavens no. Something like that could result in fewer tourists visiting the city, which meant less money, and it could cause a lot of bad publicity for the fine, upstanding police force. Wait, this is something surely easily provable. You're crossing a border. Like, you're going across the international bridge from one country to another. There's going to be a record of that. They're going to stamp you. They're going to put you in a book. Or a computer, maybe, even late 1980s? I don't know. Probably. Of course, Bill, Bradley, and Brent publicly denied their claims, leaving the Matamoros police with egg on their face. And what did Mark's parents do when word reached them that their baby boy had just up and disappeared? Well, they did what any loving parent would do, and they kicked the search for Mark into high gear. Jumping into their car, Jim and Helen Kilroy sped down to the area where Mark vanished, and they got to work. They searched high and low for him themselves, and all the while handing out more than 20,000 flyers, asking anyone if they'd seen their son. They even offered a $15,000 reward for any information leading to Mark being found and safely brought home. And they weren't alone in their search either. Bill, Bradley, and Brent never stopped looking, and numerous people from Mark's hometown also traveled to Mexico to aid in the search. This is a perfect response. This is very good. Garage sales and car washes were even set up by members of his community to raise money to help the Kilroys continue their search. Jim and Helen even met with Attorney General Jim Maddox, the then governor of Texas, William Clements, and U.S. Senator Lloyd Benson to get help and raise awareness of the case. And it soon got to the point that the case became national news after it was covered on America's Most Wanted, one of the greatest crime shows in history. Wow, I bet the Mexican police are being like, oh, for fuck's sake, there's fire being breathed down their neck. Mark's family, the police, and their neighbors did everything they possibly could, but they found nothing. No leads, no clues, zip, zilch, nada. 2 weeks went by, but they never gave up. That is, until they did get a lead, and sadly, it led to perhaps one of the most depraved and disgusting operations that we've ever covered here on The Casual Criminalist. Allure Slaughterhouse. Disclaimer, what I'm about to convey to you, Simon, and our listeners, is truly disturbing, grotesque, and heinous. However, it's the crux of the story. So as much as you might not want to, Simon, I ask that you please keep reading and relaying this to our audience, as it truly goes to show how sinister some people can be. Oh, my lord, Matt. I like my CSI. I don't like my SAW. I don't want to know about people getting their arms cut off. On April 1st, 1989, the case broke wide open and dropped all involved right through each of the 9 circles of hell. That day, a team of Mexican federales were stationed at a routine drug interdiction checkpoint. Then, out of nowhere, an unmarked truck crossed the international border from Texas into Mexico and blasted through their roadblock without stopping, without any care or worry about the cops, who were clearly sitting right there. Now, normally, situations like that would call for blaring sirens and flashing lights, right? Well, the police thought that instead of tipping their hand, they would follow the vehicle. No lights, no sirens, just a simple, silent tailing and see where the guy was off to in such a hurry. You got to assume that they're following you. If they're not chasing you, they're following you. They're not just like, just another day at the border, people blasting through with trucks. They trailed him from a distance, and the truck soon led them outside of Matamoros to an old, beat-up ranch in Santa Elena, owned by a man named Brigido Hernandez. The driver of said truck was Serafin Hernandez Garcia, the nephew of Elio Hernandez Riviera, who just happened to be an infamous local drug lord. Uh-oh. So, they did have enough to take him in, but again, the police used their better judgment, electing to wait and see. After about 30 minutes, Serafin came out, got back in the truck, and sped off again, but something still didn't seem right to the officers in regard to the ranch, and so after Serafin left, they made their way up to the ranch proper, and in their quick search, they found traces of marijuana as well as several pieces of cult paraphernalia, which isn't suspicious at all, is it? Oh god, what are they doing? Is there a weird cult going on and they're gonna oh god. Again, using their intuition, they took their time. They gathered their evidence, all concerning the movement and selling of drugs. Brownsville, and by extension Matamoros, had become overrun with the drug trade in recent years, so finding enough evidence was not that hard to do. And then, on April the 9th, they made their move, arresting several people connected to the ranch and the operation. This included both Serafin and Elio, along with David Serna Valdez, Sergio Martinez Salinas, and Domingo Reyes Bustamante. While investigating, the most mundane yet illegal things found included 110 kilograms of marijuana, it's 243 pounds, goddamn, 108 grams of cocaine, 12 firearms, including 3 submachine guns, and 11 vehicles, some equipped with telephones. It's pretty fancy for the 1980s. The first odd thing that the police noticed, once these people were handcuffed, detained, and left sitting on the ground as the investigation commenced, is that all of them were eerily calm. Relaxed as can be, all smiles, all snickering between each other. Why? Well, because they felt protected. They felt invincible. Their leader had told them they were. So yes, as you perhaps gathered from the title of this episode, it's one of those brainwashing cult situations again. You see, upon searching the ranch, it became quickly apparent just what sort of evil place the police had stumbled onto. This particular ranch had become the headquarters and sacrificial site of not only a gang of drug dealers, but a rather disturbing cult following a mixture of Christian, African, and Aztec religious practices led by an individual simply known as El Padrino, or the Godfather. According to El Padrino, all their worship and dark activities were in service to the god Allure, a deity in the Santeria region who is associated with paths, roads, and crossroads, and who is often worshipped in Latin America and Nigeria. All right, 2 very different places, very different sides of the world. By doing as El Padrino, and by extension Allure, instructed, the cult members and the drug dealers would be protected from the forces of the law and would be safeguarded from prosecution of any sort. Surely there's got to be some doubt in your mind. You're sitting there, they got you handcuffed, they're going through your drug den, and you're but I've got God on my side. I'm not going to prison. Not at all. He's going to rain down hellfire on these guys any minute now. Utter hogwash and nonsense, I know, but unfortunately they believed it, and it cost several people their lives. I'm sure you, Simon, and our dear audience caught my use of the word sacrifice a moment ago. Indeed I did. Well, sadly, it wasn't animals that these freaks were sacrificing for this divine protection. For several years, these devils in human skin had gone out of their way to look for poor, unsuspecting people who they would kidnap right off the street. Most of these people were fellow drug dealers and criminals, but they did not deserve the fate that awaited them. The gang would bring their victims back to their lair, which at this late stage was the ranch. There, these monsters would torture them and sodomize them to get their souls ready for the final process. In El Padrino's words, they must be screaming. You see, they needed to provide Allure with tortured souls they would then take into themselves, souls that would grant protection and strengthen them from within. And yes, oh god, they're eating them, aren't they? Fucking hell. And yes, I said from within. I'm sure you understand what came next. Oh good, nothing like a little bit of cannibalism. Jesus Christ. El Padrino was the main executioner, the main individual in charge of performing the sacrifices, but there were times when he trusted it to other members of the group. These ordained executioners all received membership scars, arrow-like cuts that were made with a steaming hot blade, usually on the shoulders, back, arms, and chest. From there, these poor victims, these people stolen away in the night by these lunatics, were then brought before an altar and forcibly strapped to it. And with that, El Padrino or one of the other executioners would get back to work. Their victims were flayed, skinned, dismembered, and scalped. And they were, oh, Jesus Christ, they were alive for every second of it. I thought they killed them first. Jesus. And it would all end with their hearts being violently torn from their chests. The brain came next, and it would be removed and boiled with different animal parts in a nganga, an African metal pot used for ceremonies. El Padrino would eat the brain, the cult members would be given the fingers to consume, and the heart would be shared amongst all, and what was left would be given in reverence to Allure, including the leftover brains and heart, blood and bones, and even the penis and balls. So they would be immune from the law, all under this insane delusion of receiving some sort of dark blessing. This is insane. And with that, I think you now understand what became of Mark Kilroy. While investigating the ranch, officers spoke to another caretaker of the ranch, one who wasn't as involved or knowledgeable of the evil going on down at that place. It was then they asked about Mark and showed the caretaker his picture. His answer was short, and it was simple. Yeah, I saw him. With that, he simply pointed to a rickety old shack on the ranch property, and when the police went to investigate, it was enough to turn all their stomachs. They'd found the ritual site, and the leftovers within. In the words of Sheriff Inspector George Gavito of the Cameron County Sheriff's Department, quote, "I've been on the force 15 years, and there are no words to describe what I saw there." Inside the shack, the police found the nganga waiting them. Looking inside, they found the leftovers of the previous ritual, which included the remains of a human brain, a goat's head, chicken feet, a turtle, several herbs, a horseshoe, and coins mixed with animal blood. It didn't take long for Serafin Garcia to crack once investigators separated him from the others and started questioning him heavily. He eventually confessed that several people were taken, tortured, killed, and sacrificed for their own twisted beliefs, all under the watchful eye of El Padrino, and that included Mark Kilroy. Then on April the 11th, 1989, officers brought Serafin and 4 other cult members back to the site. They gave the cult members shovels, and the police ordered the smiling loonies to start digging, holding them at gunpoint. In the end, 15 bodies in various stages of decomposition were found. While 3 of the bodies still haven't been identified to this day, all of the bodies were male, all were killed within a 9-month period, and most were rival drug dealers who were simply sacrificed to remove them from the board. One of these identified bodies, though, was Mark's. What did he do? Just stick with the fucking drug dealers. You got plenty of drug dealers, I'm sure it's Mexico. In the words of Sheriff Gavito, quoting, "I've investigated over 250 murders. This here is what you call your career case. Something nobody will ever deal with. You cannot be trained. You can't take any courses or classes to deal with this." Dr. Anthony Zavaleta was an anthropology professor at Texas Southmost College at the time, and he was brought in during the case to offer his expertise. Speaking about his experience, he doesn't mince words on the unease and fear he felt approaching that place. To quote him, "I never, until that moment, felt the presence of evil. It felt tangible. I hadn't even gotten to the place yet. I'm still 50 yards from it, but there was just a foreboding and sense of evil. When the news broke that Mark Kilroy's remains had been found and that he'd been the victim of a horrible murder and human sacrifice, it just sent a shudder through my body as a father, realizing my son was over there on the streets while these people were prowling, looking for a victim." So, what had happened to Mark exactly, and how did he end up here, dying at the hands of these vile people? Well, let's talk about that. The last time we saw Mark Kilroy, it was the early hours of March 14th, the day before the cult had sacrificed a stranger as part of a protection ritual over the transport of a shipment of 800 kilos of marijuana. But El Padrino didn't think that was enough. He wanted another sacrifice, one of more substance, a white spring breaker. As the cult members had been driving around looking for a gringo to abduct, they just happened to spot Mark walking along with his friends. As Bill ducked into that dark alleyway to take a leak, one of the cult members approached Mark, saying he'd seen him somewhere before. After luring the drunk college student away from his friends and towards a waiting truck, the door to the truck opened, and Serafin Hernandez Garcia, along with another cult member named Marlio Fabio Ponce Torres, grabbed Mark and pulled him into the truck before closing the door and speeding away. After wrestling with Mark until they thought he was restrained, one of the members asked to stop the truck so that he could catch his breath. As soon as the group pulled over, only a couple of blocks from where they'd abducted him from, Mark took his chance and bolted from the vehicle. He was only a couple of blocks away. If he ran fast enough, if he shouted loud enough, someone would hear him, right? Well, sadly, that wasn't to be. Another vehicle, one that had been following behind the first, screeched to a halt in front of him, blocking his way. More cult members spilled out and snatched him once more, throwing him into the back of the car. And they sped off into the night. Taking every back road and quiet street they could, the cult members drove out of the city, making it back to the ranch unnoticed. Mark was left restrained in the car overnight, with only his thoughts and the darkness outside the windows to keep him company. We can only imagine what was going through his head. The next morning, in an act of final kindness, the ranch's caretaker came by with a breakfast of bread, eggs, and water. It was only then that he was visited by El Padrino and his men. Being bound, blindfolded, and gagged with duct tape, Mark Kilroy was repeatedly tortured and sodomized by El Padrino all throughout the night of March the 15th. After it was all over, El Padrino led Mark, still blindfolded, into a nearby field. Beaten, bloody, and weak with pain, Mark complied. His needs satiated, and with the need for sacrifice still at hand, El Padrino drew a machete and struck Mark repeatedly in the head and neck, killing the poor boy. Afterwards, numerous parts of his body were removed and consumed before he was buried. They even removed his legs to make his body easier to dispose of. Once Mark was unearthed, he was so mutilated and decomposed already that the only way to ID him was through his dental records. It didn't take long for news of Mark's fate to circulate, and at Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church in Santa Fe on April the 13th, 1989, what was meant to be a ceremony to rekindle hopes of finding Mark alive became a memorial service in his name. Another service, held at St. Luke Catholic Church in Brownsville, saw over 1,200 people attend to give their condolences to the Kilroys and to mourn Mark. A large number of them even wore yellow bands on their arms in solidarity with him, each with the words, "Miss you, Mark." And afterwards, Jim and Helen Kilroy showed that they're far better people than I could hope to be. Not only did they say they forgave the killers, not only did they ask all the people there to pray for the killers, but they said they hoped that when the killers got to heaven, they would apologize to their son for what they did to him. Oh my God. Like I said, far better people than I. Yeah, no, I'd just be like, okay, cool. I'm just going to make sure that you get killed. Like, somehow. Just going to make sure that you stop breathing. With all these drug dealers and delusional cultists under arrest, and the mystery of what happened to Mark solved, some questions still remained. Who the hell was El Padrino, and where the hell was he? El Padrino. Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo was born in Miami, Florida on November 1st, 1962. His mother, Delia Aurora Gonzalez, was a Cuban immigrant, while also being only 15 when she gave birth to Adolfo. Her first husband was Adolfo's biological father, but he passed away when Adolfo was but an infant. After the death of her husband, Delia took the baby and joined her family in moving to San Juan, Puerto Rico, where it didn't take long for her to remarry and have another child. Adolfo was baptized at the behest of his stepfather, and he even served as an altar boy for a time. The strict traditions of the Catholic Church, though, weren't really to Delia's taste, and she and Adolfo later withdrew from the church. Instead, Delia would take little vacations over to Haiti, and she'd always take her son with her. Haiti's the voodoo place, right? Seeing a connection here, and also possibly seeing another connection between the Catholic Church and what was done to old Mark there, allegedly. While there, she would practice Haitian voodoo and would teach her son these practices as well. Now, there's nothing wrong with voodoo. It certainly has gotten a bad rap over the years in all sorts of media, with things like voodoo dolls and necromancy being likened to the actual religion. Overall, it's a harmless practice when done properly, but as with all belief systems, it can be horribly twisted, especially in regards to practitioners' beliefs in possession and animal sacrifice. In 1972, Adolfo and his family returned to Miami, and tragedy struck the family once more when a year later his stepfather passed away from cancer. With both of his fathers dead, and with his mother constantly dragging him to a new town every few months, Adolfo latched on to the darker practices of voodoo and the control he believed it gave him. Soon enough, Delia remarried, once more, this time to a horribly abusive man who dealt in drugs and was deeply into the voodoo styles of religion. He and Adolfo bonded over twisting these beliefs for darker purposes, and at the age of 10, Adolfo became the apprentice of a local priest in New Havana who practiced Palo Mayombe, or Palo for short. So, what is Palo? Well, it's an African diasporic religion that developed in Cuba during the late 19th or early 20th century, and just happens to involve animal sacrifice. I think we're seeing a pattern here. Yeah, definitely, you can see how all these little elements of his past are coming together to form the monster of a man that he ultimately becomes. Adolfo and Delia were, of course, more than happy to partake and participate, immersing themselves in the criminal lifestyle and getting arrested numerous times for theft, vandalism, and shoplifting. As Adolfo's teenage years rolled by, he started telling fortunes for those who wanted them and started hanging out at gay clubs. It's hard to truly point out where things truly went wrong for Adolfo. He had his troubles, his tragedies, just like we all do, but nothing really significant stands out outside the voodoo practices, that is. Again, the practice of voodoo isn't an inherently evil thing, but in the hands of a mind that just maybe was always dark and twisted, it can be used for devilish work indeed. I mean, his background does seem pretty f***ed up. Is it any excuse? Absolutely not. None at all. But it does seem like he did not have a particularly stable childhood. Now, an adult in 1983, Adolfo moved to Mexico City all by himself, at least on the outside. If you'd ask him, I'm sure he'd tell you he certainly wasn't, as his master was always with him. You see, before moving to his new home, Adolfo pledged himself and his soul to his Kaida Mpembe, the Palo Mayombe equivalent of the devil. Yeah, the man had fully and willingly given himself over to darkness, and he knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted followers, he wanted power, he wanted influence, and he wanted money. And he was prepared to use fear and superstition to get all of it. As soon as he arrived in Mexico City, he got to work. He started his own cult that doubled as a drug cartel. Quite a way to inspire loyalty in your men, isn't it? Like, oh no, we're not a regular drug cartel. We're a cult. I'm Jesus. He found and recruited his first followers, Martin Quintana Rodriguez, Omar Area Ahoa, and Jorge Montes, two of whom he actually started having sexual relations with. It started out small, with the cartel selling Adolfo's fortune tellings and spell castings, which enabled them to gain favor and influence with gangsters and drug dealers, as well as high-ranking corrupt law enforcement officials. How did they achieve this? Why, with animal sacrifices, of course. Chickens, goats, zebras, snakes, even lion cubs. Where the fuck are you getting a lion cub from in Mexico? Nothing was off the table, even if they had to spend a bit of extra money on the exotic animals. They even raided local graveyards to use actual human remains in their rituals, putting them in the Ngunga to stew. Oh my god. It's pretty disgusting stuff, indeed. It got to the point where Adolfo was able to purchase a $60,000 condominium along with numerous luxury cars. Depravity pays, sadly, and he had a lucrative, albeit unethical, con going on. So what happened? Why did he turn to actually killing people? Simple. He wanted more. I just don't understand this. It's like things I want more of, like success and money, things I don't want more of. Killing? Like, what the fuck? Eventually, he took on a new client, a high-ranking policewoman who had plenty of cartel connections. Her connections became his connections, and many members of these cartels took a liking to him. Enforcers, drug dealers, hitmen, you name it. They came to him and enjoyed his spooky song and dance, finding him entertaining and the prospect of mystical protection alluring. This included the infamous Gulf Cartel, a deadly criminal syndicate and drug trafficking organization in Mexico, one of the oldest organized crime groups in the country, whose rap sheet is a mile long. Based primarily out of Matamoros, their activities include drug trafficking, money laundering, extortion, kidnapping, human trafficking, people smuggling, robbery, murder, arms trafficking, bribery, fencing, and counterfeiting. Quite the company to keep. And soon enough, Adolfo fell even more into the madness of his own making. He started to believe that the magic he got from Palo was actually real, that he was some sort of dark chosen one, and that he should get a higher position in the cartels because of it. I think this dude believes this. I don't think he's just doing it all for show. I think he really believes in this stuff because he's a bit mad. And by a bit mad, I mean he's mad. He was providing them with dark divine protection after all. He sought out the Calzares, another one of the most infamous families in the area, but they turned him down. So what did he do? He showed them that he wasn't to be trifled with, bro. Showing the drug cartels you're not to be trifled with? Let's just leave that to the CIA. Let's just leave it to a country rather than, one mystical dude who thinks he's a magical demon. You see, Adolfo realized that animal sacrifices weren't enough, so he decided that the taking of a human life would add even more power and protection to himself and his benefactors. By that point, up to 20 people had already disappeared by his hands, and with the refusal from the Calzares, it jumped to 27, which included 7 members of the Calzares gang. This guy is he is the danger. Eventually, their remains were found. Sans fingers, toes, ears, and brains. One of them even had their whole spine missing. With Adolfo's influence and infamy already on the rise in the Mexican criminal underworld, it wasn't long before his inner circle grew. Sarah Maria Aldrete Villarreal, aka La Martina, or the Godmother, was recruited shortly after the Calzares killing spree, and she and Adolfo hit it off from the get-go. He introduced her to his ways of witchcraft and voodoo, and she took to it like a fish to water, gaining the title of High Priestess within the cult, and soon she was acting as Adolfo's second-in-command, with him leaving her in control of the cult at times when he was managing the drug-related activities, including the selling and storing of marijuana and cocaine. Gary Cartwright, a writer for Texas Monthly back in the day, and while covering this story, wrote this excerpt in the June 1989 edition, quoting him, "Constanzo introduced various forms of mind control in the guise of religious mumbo-jumbo. As Charles Manson had used the Beatles song Helter Skelter, the Cuban used a movie called The Believers, in which a father and his son are caught in a web of black magic." Then, in 1988, Adolfo and his cult moved their operation to Rancho Santa Elena, and we know what happened from there. Many rituals were held at that little ranch in the desert, many animals were killed, and many rival drug dealers were kidnapped and killed too. These victims include names such as Hector de la Fuente and Moses Callisto on May 28, 1988, Raul Paz Esquivel in 1988, an unnamed victim in August 1988, and many others. Adolfo had wanted more power, more protection, and he felt that to get that, he needed to sacrifice a gringo, a wealthy white boy, a happy kid just down in Mexico having a good time during spring break. He wanted his life, his blood, his innocence, his, as Adolfo put it, superior brain. And sadly, he got it. But arguably, it was because of his selfish wants, his need for power and influence, that murdering Mark brought his whole operation tumbling down. Chasing the devil. With his followers in custody and his operation in shambles, Adolfo went into hiding on April the 11th, 1989. He was furious that the ranch had been confiscated and the bodies found. He had no shit. And after it all, the police had his name, they knew who he was, and no amount of magic spells could change that. He gathered 4 of his most faithful, that being Sarah Aldrete, Martin Quintana Rodriguez, Omar Francisco Arrea Aroja, and Alvaro de Leon Valdez, who was also known as El Dubi, and they hit the road together. He started in Brownsville before catching a flight to McAllen, Texas, and from there, he fled to his apartment in Mexico City. The United States authorities and the Mexican police force both wanted El Padrino brought in and brought to justice. An international manhunt was launched, and both the US and Mexican authorities put as much manpower on the case as they could. At first, they believed he had fled to Florida, where his mother lived, but that ended up being a bust, and soon enough, rumors started popping up of people spotting him all over, each lead ending up at a dead end. His face, as well as those of his followers, were well known thanks to the news, and paranoia was high. There was even a rumor going around the Rio Grande Valley that Sarah was spotted in the area, promising to kidnap children from schools to sacrifice for every jailed member of the cult. Collective fear is a very real thing. Jesus. Catch this motherfucker. And how do they kill people in Mexico? Does Mexico have the death penalty? I feel like the answer's got to be yes, right? Mexico, go, go, go. In the 80s, let's catch him. Let's catch him and, I don't know, fucking hang him. Firing squad, something like that. Over the ensuing months, several additional cult members and affiliates were taken into custody, and a number of their homes and properties that belonged to Adolfo were raided and searched. Drug-related business papers, ceremonial candles, ritualistic altars, and homosexual porn were found in places he frequently stayed. They even searched his home in Mexico City and found a private hidden torture chamber. The sick freak even enjoyed inflicting violence and pain in his personal time. But then, it all came to an end, all thanks to luck and circumstance. The Mexico City PD had come under the assumption that El Padrino was holed up in their city. Murders similar to those committed in Matamoros had also begun taking place in Mexico City for 2 years, and they wanted to stop it. No shit. Also, he owns this apartment in Mexico. Just go look. We're like, where could he be? They think he's in the city. Have you looked at his house yet? Mexican authorities are very familiar with local superstitions and the practicing of the magic arts, as phony as that might be, and they set about interrogating local sorcerers and witch doctors, hoping to sniff out a lead, and thankfully, they were in luck. Hitting the streets, they heard word that Adolfo was perhaps hiding out either in the borough of Cuauhtemoc or Veronica Anzures, which was right next door. A unit of 16 officers was then sent to investigate, and after asking around, they found out that a woman matching Sarah's description had been spotted in the local area. It was then, after getting this small lead, that the cops quickly received a much bigger one. At that moment, the authorities were speaking to locals within the supermarket about a woman they had seen when they saw a suspicious man attempting to purchase a large amount of groceries with US currency. While they tailed the man, they saw him entering an apartment on Rio Sena, and it didn't take long to identify the man. He was Alvaro de Leon Valdez, aka El Dubi, one of Adolfo's most loyal cultist henchmen, and all those supplies and groceries were being bought for Adolfo Constanzo. It was May the 6th, 1989, a little over a month after Mark had been kidnapped and a month since Adolfo had gone on the run. By now, Adolfo was a paranoid mess, and he was on the lookout for any sign of danger to himself and his much-coveted freedom. On that day, the authorities decided that they were going to raid the apartment and apprehend the mad cult leader. The building was surrounded, and they wanted to wait for traffic to slow down so they could enter the building without much chance of collateral damage. But they hit a snag. A black vehicle pulled up in front of the apartment complex and parked right out front of the building that was housing Adolfo and his people. Understandably, a few members of the police approached the vehicle to investigate, to see if it had anything to do with the cult. I couldn't find any information on whether it did contain members of the cult, but one thing was for sure, Adolfo had seen them. With his paranoia and fear taking over his senses, he didn't hesitate to open fire on the police from the safety of his apartment. Bro, you're cooked. Like, really? For 45 whole minutes, he used nearly every single bullet at his disposal, throwing golden coins and paper money out of the window at them and burning some of his money on a stove out of his own panicked madness. Soon enough, Adolfo ran out of ammo, but had only managed to injure one of the 180 police officers who were gathered outside. Well done. Jesus, how incompetent can you be? Realizing this, Adolfo saw the writing on the wall and realized that he was on the verge of capture and prosecution. I hope he kept one bullet for himself. He made the decision. As the old saying goes, you never take me alive. There was a pause in the mayhem, only for a few moments, before a series of rapid-fire gunshots rang out. It didn't come from the windows, though. It had come from deeper in the apartment. Cautious, and with their guns drawn, a group of police officers made their way into the building and up the stairs towards Adolfo's residence. Before they could even open the door, Sarah Aldrete, hysterical with tears flowing down her eyes, dashed out towards them, screaming at the top of her lungs that Adolfo was no more. Oh, Sarah, you're also going to prison forever. You're going to prison forever, where you belong. They arrested her and took her away, and the remaining officers entered the apartment. It was full of smoke, both from the burning stove and the excessive gunfire, and they soon found a dazed El Dubi, machine gun in hand, pointing its muzzle to the floor. He too was arrested, and it wasn't long before they found Adolfo. He, along with his lover, Martin Quintana Rodriguez, were lying against the wall inside of a closet, their bodies riddled with bullet holes. In his fear of capture, Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, famously known as El Padrino, the madman behind all the bloodshed and pain caused to numerous people and families, took a page from another infamous Adolf's book and had asked El Dubi to kill him and Martin so that he wouldn't be captured by the police. El Dubi said he couldn't do it, but Adolfo wouldn't take no for an answer. He slapped El Dubi hard across the face and screamed at him that if he didn't, he would suffer in hell for all eternity for not doing as he was commanded. Given all the heinous shit every one of the cult was a part of, I'm pretty sure all of them are going to burn in hell one day, but that's just me. Regardless, the threat of eternal damnation was enough to convince El Dubi to do as he'd been told, and so he agreed to Adolfo's plan. After entering the closet, Adolfo and Martin embraced each other as the machine gun was raised, and then, in a smatter of bullets, it was over, and both men slumped to the floor, dead. The reign of terror was finally over. Sarah and El Dubi were taken into custody, as were Omar Francisco Orea Aroja, Juan Carlos Fregoso, and Jorge Montes, with El Padrino dead as a doornail. All the fight and resistance had simply drained out of them. Two more cultists, Maria de Lourdes Guerrero Lopez and Maria del Rocio Cuevas Guerra, were also arrested that day, deeper in Mexico City. Under interrogation, El Dubi rambled on, saying over and over that while they'd been stuck in that apartment, Adolfo had realized that everything was lost and that no one was going to have his money. Okay, dude, no one cares. No one cares. El Dubi confessed to the police that he had participated in the kidnapping, torture, and murder of Mark Kilroy, as well as many other murders. He was adamant that Adolfo was the ringleader and that he had conducted and executed most of the numerous murders the cult had been a part of, which the police agreed with. Sarah, on the other hand, proclaimed her innocence in all of it, no matter what all the evidence and testimony said. To this day, she still says she's innocent, and that she didn't take part in the killings, and that she had only been an initiate of the group and was being held prisoner while in Mexico City. It's not a bad line to run, is it? I don't believe it at all, but yeah, I mean, what you got to lose, really? According to her, she didn't even know about any of the murders, let alone Mark's, until she saw about it afterwards on the television. Yes, sure, Sarah, and I'm Gabriel Iglesias. In total, 14 members of the cult were taken into custody, and all of them were charged with the various criminal activities which were committed by the cult, which included murder, drug trafficking, firearms offenses, obstruction of justice, criminal association, wounding an officer, and damage of property. This included the arrest of a police chief, Salvador Vidal Garcia Alarcon, of the Federal Judicial Police, who was linked to the cult and was arrested for drug trafficking. He, of course, denies all of this and said it only sought El Padrino out for his aid in getting rid of spirits that were haunting him. Yeah, I don't believe him either, especially when 2 of the murdered victims were linked to him. Yeah, come on, please. Come on, mate. And you're a cop. You're going to have a rough time in prison where you belong. On May 15th, 1989, the 7 arrested at the apartment or in Mexico City that day were taken before a judge, and bail was denied to all of them, as their charges together were tallied at well over 50 years in prison. Yeah, no shit. Be a bit weird if he gave bail to the torturous cult member. The charges between all of them included multiple homicides, 31 years, possession of narcotics, 12, involvement in organized crime, 5, police impersonation, 2, illegal body desecration, 2, illegal possession of firearms, 10, and illegal possession of weapons exclusive to the Mexican Armed Forces, 5 years. In August of 1990, El Dubi was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of Adolfo Constanzo and Martin Rodriguez. On May 3, 1994, Sarah Aldrete was sentenced to 62 years in prison for a deep involvement in the cult and their murderous practices. Good. She's still alive and bitching about it to this day, claiming innocence to anyone who will believe her, which is nobody. Nobody believes you, Sarah, you piece of shit. She is interviewed by the press about it from time to time, and she even wrote an autobiography where she says she was mistreated by the authorities and held hostage by Adolfo, which clearly wasn't true. She even tried to claim it was the police that killed Adolfo, not El Dubi, which we all know is a lie. Yet El Dubi said he did it. He admitted his guilt. But I say let her keep screaming into the wind, she isn't going anywhere. Serafin Jr. and Delia Hernandez, Martinez Salinas, and Serna Valdez each received 67 years on the same day Sarah was sentenced, though those sentences were later shorted to 50 years each on March 27, 1998. As of today, only 2 additional cult members, Ovidio and Ponce Torres, remain at large and are still actively being sought for the murder of Mark Kilroy. Holy shit, they weren't caught? They're still at large? Wow. That's depressing. Let's round up these fuckers and kill them. None of the other cult members that are still alive and behind bars today have been charged with his murder, but should they ever get out, the US authorities are still waiting in the wings, ready to put them behind bars all over again. None of them got the needle, but it sounds like justice done to me. No, I think the El Dubi guy and Sarah, they should have been executed. I'd have liked to see them executed. So I guess they do have the needle in Mexico. There we go. Wrap up. I got that thirst for blood. I'm just like, fuck this, dude. I'm just not into that. Thirst for blood. And just like that, we've come to the end. This one makes it 40 scripts officially in the bag. Well, congratulations, Matt. And I swear these cases never get easier. Talk about vile, talk about Machiavellian, talk about selfish, talk about evil. Mark Kilroy was an innocent college kid who simply wanted to go and have a great time over spring break with his buddies, the last time they could do so together. And it all went to ruin. He was stolen away in the night, taken from his family and friends forever, before being sexually assaulted, tortured, and even killed. All so these demented people could feel powerful and protected in their illegal activities. His life snuffed out like a candle in the wind. All for nothing. He didn't deserve that. None of the other victims deserved that, and all at the hands of an insane, paranoid, superstitious, bloodthirsty megalomaniac who felt he had the power of the devil and black magic on his side. Adolfo Constanzo was a lunatic, cannibal, a sexual deviant, a false prophet, and a murderer, all wrapped up into a handsome and charismatic package, a deadly concoction. And when everything finally came crashing down around him, he simply couldn't face the consequences of his own actions, and he took the easy way out. Well, as easy a way as a hail of machine gun fire can be, I suppose. In the wake of the evil tragedy, the Kilroys didn't let it destroy them, and instead used their pain for something positive. 2 months after Mark's passing, Jim and Helen created the Mark Kilroy Foundation, which promotes drug awareness, education, and prevention through the Just Say No campaign. The foundation does its best to help children follow their dreams while also being aware of the dangers of drugs. Counselors from the program visit school campuses year-round to talk to children and keep them aware. And they even run summer camps that even offer free outdoor activities like archery, golf, fishing, tennis, and swimming. Mark wanted to do his part to help people. He wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to make the world a better place. And while Helen sadly passed away from ALS at the age of 70 in 2014, his father and those within the program continued to keep his dream alive. And so we end today's tale. Just remember Mark Kilroy, as well as the rest of the victims that were stolen from this world far too soon. Also, don't let this discourage you from going on holiday either. Vacations are meant to be fun, and more than likely, you'll never run into the situations described in this script. Just go and have fun. But stay vigilant. And in the words of Ryan Fenley, quote, "If you're going to go into those areas, you better stay in groups. Do not get separated whatsoever, not even for 1 minute. Do not walk over there carrying lots and lots of cash. Do not carry lots of jewelry. Fine clothing will bring attention to yourselves. Know your surroundings. Don't stick your face in that phone. Know your environment. Be alert. Because if your head's down and you're not paying attention, you can be a prime target." Good advice, and it's advice that we end today's episode on. Thank you for being here.